Hello everyone, welcome to the Pisces Guide to Pop Culture. I'm of course your host TJ West, coming before you today to talk about one of my favorite fantasy authors and one of their fantastic books. I'm speaking of course of Kingfisher, who thanks to my queer book club here in Salisbury, I have recently discovered and fallen completely in love with. And Thornhedge, as you may know if you've read it or have heard of it, is a retelling of the Sleeping Beauty myth. In this case, it's from the point of view of the bad fairy, who curses, the princess to eternal slumber, and also has to keep her imprisoned in this, thorn hedge. Now, creatively and kind of ingeniously, if you ask me, Kingfisher positions us in the eyes of Toadling, who is this human, but who was stolen by the fairies when she was a child and a baby, taken to fairy, and then reared among the sort of like swamp folk in the fairy realm, before being sent back to our world to try to keep the changeling that was left in her place from becoming a destructive monster, which she moderately succeeds in doing. She manages to put her to sleep and imprisons her with water magic, but obviously then has to sort of live around the region for centuries while she sort of waits for things to happen and waits for, as it turns out, a lovely young Muslim man named Halim who comes by, and then they sort of strike up a friendship, and we get sort of toggled back and forth between past and present as we learn more about Toadling and what brought her to this place. Now, I love Kingfisher. I love the way that Kingfisher manages to be very evocative and very descriptive with her prose without sort of getting caught up in strangled similes or sort of overwrought metaphors. Not an easy thing to do, particularly in fantasy, which kind of invites that kind of overwrought language. And I really kind of envy that, and that's something I'm sort of aspiring to in my own work, is to capture that sort of delicate balance that Kingfisher does seemingly so effortlessly. It's also true that I think Kingfisher is really the master of the novella as a form. I mean, this book is only a little more than 100 pages. It's very slender, but it's such a rich, complex story with so much going on that I'm just like, wow, how did you manage to cram so much into such a small amount of space? Now, I think that it's quite clever and quite cute to make Toadling into sort of literally this very plain-faced fairy that manages to transform into a toad when she needs to. It kind of peels away the glamour that we associate with the fairies in typical mythology. Certainly, it's no Maleficent who sort of plays that role in the Disney film. And because of that, that gives Toadling's story, I think, a bit more pathos than we might have expected. I definitely think this is a superior retelling of the evil story, fairy story, than, say, the movie Maleficent, which I was not thrilled with back in the day. Don't hate me. And I also think that, what's really fascinating and even kind of terrifying about this book is Fayette, who is the changeling left in Toadling's place among the mortals, and is soon revealed to be quite a monster. Like, she's just so utterly alien and so utterly inhuman that you can't help but be fascinated and repelled by her at the same time. And that holds true for many of the other fairy characters that sort of drift in and out of the narrative. And as Toadling herself frequently remarks, like, the danger of the Fae is that they tend to lose interest in humans, even as they have the capacity to basically destroy them with basically almost no thought involved. And that's something that I think many of the best stories that involve the fairy folk sort of help us to understand how utterly beyond human comprehension they are, and there's something terrifying about that. We see it, obviously there are efficacies of this in Tolkien, where, the elves are these utterly inhuman creatures that sort of float above the mortal realm. But I think, what makes this novel so special is that Toadling is this liminal figure that sits in between the fairy and human realms, and that's what gives her sort of understanding. It's what makes us love her. It's what makes us appreciate the friendship that she strikes up with Halim, whom she tries to protect, despite his own sort of silliness. Like, he, is determined to get into this castle, even though she keeps trying to tell him, like, you don't want this, like, you don't understand. So there's just a lot going on, and, this novel has some really big feelings. There's regret, there's, compassion, there's pity, there's fear, sadness, sorrow, happiness, some joy. I think that's really quite a panoply of emotions for one novella to really capture effectively. But as I've, discovered as I've been reading through Kingfisher's work, as well as some of the other big works in the novella tradition lately, that's, I think, a good form to capture so much of what we love about fantasy without getting bogged down into narratives that last forever. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I love epics as much as anyone. But sometimes I do like a little refresher, something that's more of a meal than a short story, but less of an undertaking than a novel. So there's a lot to praise about Thornhedge. I really did enjoy it. I found it was really one of, my favorite books that I've read so far this year. I like books that make me feel things here at the Pisces Guide to Pop Culture, and T. Kingfisher always does that. She always manages to make me feel things, whether horror and things like What Moves the Dead, or just sadness and, a bit of pathos as we get with the Thornhedge. So, I have a lot more thoughts about this at my Substack newsletter Omnivorous, but I wanted to sort of close here, by urging you to sign up for the newsletter. I love doing these short videos, but, I have a wide variety of projects that I need people to sign up for, but I won't belabor that. So anyway, this definitely gets the Pisces Guide to Pop Culture seal of approval. So that's all for this installment. As always, I'm your host, TJ. Thanks so much for joining me, and take care, y'all.